Good morning. Thank you. Just a couple of quick reminders. Please make sure all cell phones are turned off. Make sure all earbuds are put away. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This morning we have an outstanding opportunity to induct the first 4 members of the Hall of Distinguished Service. These 4 members were chosen by a large group for their accomplishments, some as former educators, some as former students of Dover-Sherborn. As always with any assemblies, I would ask for your utmost respect and respect. And I think you'll have an awesome opportunity to hear from some outstanding people. Great accomplishments both in DS, outside of DS, and the world. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. William Davis, longtime educator, coach, and a recent member of the Athletic Hall of Fame, to begin our program. Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much, Headmaster John Smith. I appreciate your work with this committee and your support entirely for it all. Well, as he said, I'm William Davis, former Social Studies Department head and former basketball, baseball, and tennis coach at Dover-Sherborn High School. I created the Hall of Distinguished Service last year. I have the privilege of working with an absolutely outstanding committee. The committee consists of your headmaster, John Smith, with whom I'm so thankful that he has supported the Hall of Distinguished Service right from the beginning. Then your science teacher, Janae Barrett, your former foreign language department head, Lorraine Witzberg, and current tennis and golf coach and former athletic director of Medfield High School, and also former basketball player at Dover-Sherborn in my 1972 basketball team, John Kirby. I want to thank Michael King for a great job of raising money for our display case, which will go in the hallway in the front of the building, and for plaques, and for a luncheon that we're going to have at the Heritage Inn. We formed this committee for 2 purposes. One, to honor former Dover-Sherborn students or teachers or individuals connected to Dover-Sherborn High School who did exceptional service for humanity or society anywhere in the world. The second purpose was to inspire current Dover-Sherborn students, you young people, to aspire in some way to better society and better the lives of human beings. The 4 individuals who will receive this award today have made this world more humane, and it's their hope and the committee's hope that you students will go from Dover-Sherborn and make this world more humane and more just. To find these outstanding individuals, the committee reached out to former Dover-Sherborn students, teachers, and anyone connected with the high school to nominate the individuals to be honored. We received many outstanding nominees. The committee selected the following individuals. Lou DeTami was an outstanding teacher and humanitarian at Dover-Sherborn High School. He will be introduced by the former Dover-Sherborn teacher, Ann Piccardo. Hillary Binder is a great humanitarian who was a DS grad. She will be introduced by the former Dover-Sherborn teacher, Rebecca Visalis. And Judge Diane Kottmeyer was a former DS teacher who became a great criminal prosecutor and an outstanding Superior Court judge. Former teacher Mary Nelson and I both nominated her. Mary cannot be here today, so I'm introducing Judge Kottmeyer. Lastly, Charlie Sennett was a Dover-Sherborn student who became a world-renowned journalist. He will be introduced by Rebecca Visalis. Ann Piccardo will now introduce Lou DeTami.
morning. Thank you so much, Bill. It's an honor to introduce Lou DeTommy. I was fortunate to teach science in the science department for over 30 years with Lou DeTommy. During his tenure here, Lou taught every single science in the science department. Lou was a native of Sherborn. He spent most of his teaching career here at Dover-Sherborn High School, but he also taught at Framingham State College and also Brandeis University. If your mother or father attended Dover-Sherborn, please go home tonight and ask them if they had Mr. DeTommy. I am sure they have a wonderful memory or a story about Mr. DeTommy, as he influenced the students here at Dover-Sherborn in so many ways. Lou is an avid runner, having run in over 40 marathons by the time he was 40. He was instrumental in establishing the track program here at Dover-Sherborn and is still involved in officiating track meets. Many of the programs that are here at Dover-Sherborn were started by Mr. DeTommy. The annual blood drive, as well as the Friday morning trip to the Pine Street Inn, just to name a few. Mr. DeTommy was a great educator here, but he also worked at the Natick Army Labs for the government for over 30 years, where he was instrumental in developing many things that were used by the Army and received many awards for his contributions and service. The one thing that stands out about Lou is his contributions to others and his sense of volunteerism. In 2015, Mr. DeTommy was honored by the New England Patriots as a difference maker. Mr. DeTommy has donated platelets over 700 times at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. The list could go on. He has 3 lovely daughters, 7 grandchildren, and a lovely wife, Patricia, whom he's been married to for over 50 years. It is an honor to have taught with Mr. DeTommy, and I consider him a good friend. And I am very happy that he was selected for this wonderful accomplishment. Lou.
Wow, was that me? Good morning, Dover-Sherborn. I am pleased to share the stage today with this outstanding cast. And I want to thank Mr. Bill Davis, the search committee, and Ian Picardo for all of the work they've done to bring this together. But I'm also pleased and proud to be selected for the Raider Hall of Distinguished Service, but prouder still to be part of the Dover-Sherborn family. I was such a lucky guy to work with so many wonderful students and teachers since 1969. There's a wonderful statement that was given by a grandmother of Maya Angelou, and she said to her, "Sister, when you get, give. When you learn, teach. These are lessons to live by." Those words echo in my heart, and they remind me of the person that I want to be. Dover-Sherborn, for me, was more than a workplace. The staff and the students were part of my extended family. One of the teachers that I worked with early in the 70s, Florence Crenshaw, said once, "We want all of our students to become everything they are capable of becoming." She revolutionized counseling by establishing the peer counseling program, a system that has been modeled across the country. I was surrounded by distinguished staff members, a distinguished group of faculty, and they helped me and inspired me to become everything I was capable of becoming. Early risers would find me running roads in Dover and Sherborn, And a lot of people said, boy, Lou, you are really dedicated to your sport. But because I had 3 daughters, they didn't realize I was really dedicated to the hot water showers at the school. You could also find me in those sciences, earth science, biology, chemistry, and physics. But one of the courses that I enjoyed the most we helped create was a course called Science and Technology. And I worked down in the wood shop, and that course is still flourishing today, and one of the things that I'm most proud of. After school, I coached cross country and track, and on weekends, I did chaperoning. In fact, in this auditorium, back in the early 70s, we had a local rock band, a terrible group, as I remember, play, and students were quite upset about them. But that group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2015. And if you Google them, you'll find that Aerosmith played here in December of 1971. I'm often asked where I found the time for everything that I've done. Well, I want to just say to everybody here that everything that I've done that I'm getting credit for took less time than going to a movie, a concert, or a ball game. If something's important, you find the time. One of my early mentors said to me once, he said, Lou, he said, I really admire the work ethic of evil people. And I said, what? And he said, yeah. He said, look at them. All the energy and the effort that they put into doing those terrible things. He said, that's great. He said, if good people worked as hard as those people, what a great world this would be. And so I followed his lead, and I used to volunteer a lot, and I volunteered at shelters. And I remember one morning, somewhere in the 70s, one of my first classes of the day, someone said, hey, Mr. D, how was your weekend? And I said, oh, it was great. And I talked about what I had done that weekend at a shelter. At the end of class, 2 students, and I still can see them, came up to me and said, hey, Mr. D, do you think we could come in and volunteer at the shelter with you? In a few months, I had a carload of kids and fellow teachers, one of them who's still here, coming in town with me, and we were serving meals. We were peeling potatoes. We were peeling carrots. We were washing floors. We brought a lot to that shelter, Pine Street and the St. Francis House. But the most important thing we did is we greeted each guest with dignity, and we smiled, and we recognized them as people. Later, in the early 90s, I was out in the cafeteria there, and a young woman came up to me and said, Mr. D, I have a plan. And she said, you're the perfect person. I said, what? And she said, I think we should go in town and serve breakfast at the Pine Street Inn to the men and women of the shelter. And I said, Lauren, you really think that DS kids would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drive into town to serve breakfast? And she said, I've already got a dozen kids signed up. And I said, okay, Lauren, but this is such a crazy and bizarre idea. Do you think the administration would go for it? And where am I going to get a car big enough? And she said, we'll use the school van. A few weeks later, I'm driving a clunky old school van into Boston, leaving around 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were serving breakfast at the Pine Street Inn. Some of the gang went over to the men's side, some to the women. And a lot of people said, boy, that's a great thing you're doing for the kids. And I said, I'm doing it for me. And I need to tell you, those kids inspired me. I was inspired by the girl who got the breakfast ball running. I was inspired by the kids who went to stores and pick up bakery goods. But one of the most touching things I saw with the a few kids who would, every time we went in on Fridays, would be bringing in fresh fruit and pastries, and they'd go over to the women's section to serve the woman that they had bonded with. Those students made a difference in the lives of the people at Pine Street, but they also made a difference in my life because they reminded me of the innate goodness of people. In 1983, we had a principal here, Thomas "The Rock" Marlborough. And The Rock called me into his office one day and said, "Lou, we got a problem." And of course, right away, I started thinking about my resume and where I'd have to get a new job. He said, "One of our boys, Jimmy, is in trouble in town, and he needs a special type of blood." Well, The Rock asked me to go in town to volunteer. I didn't know any better. I went in. Turns out I had to sit on a machine for a couple of hours, and they separated my blood into platelets and whole blood. I've never been a fan of needles, and I will tell you this, even though you heard what she said. I need Novocaine to get a haircut, so I'm not a keen lover of needles. But I went in because The Rock asked me to, and because I like Jimmy. It seemed like a nice thing to do. But what I learned about Dana-Farber and the work they do, treating patients, what I learned about platelets and how platelets are necessary for keeping people alive, it became something that changed from a nice thing to do to a necessary thing to do. I think that was my most important breakthrough, understanding. 2015, the Patriots invited me to a football game, and they presented us as difference makers. And I was out there with a bunch of people, and I listened to what they said about them, and I was impressed. And I wondered what the heck I was doing out in the middle of the football field. But as we walked off the field, and we exchanged ideas, I discovered that we all shared the same belief, that we could change our small section of the world by spending just a little bit of time, and we could make this world a better place. So I want to tell you, Dover-Sherborn students and staff, and I say staff because I had secretaries and custodians, all sorts of people come into the shelters with me. Each one of us can be a difference maker, and we can make this world a better place. When good people act, sometimes others notice and follow their example. I was very fortunate to have caring people around me, and I followed their good example. Hopefully, my actions have been a seed for others to follow. Find your own path. Become everything you are capable of becoming. And along the way, remember the words of Maya Angelou's grandmother. When you get, give. When you learn, teach. These are lessons to live by. Thank you.
Hello, Dover-Sherborn. It's good to be back. It's with greatest pleasure to be here today, to take part in this, and to recognize a couple of my former students. When asked to nominate former graduates for their distinguished service to humanity, my good friend and former student Hilary Binder Aviles immediately came to mind. I've had the privilege of following her exemplary career through our friendship, which began in 1981 when Hilary was a student in my U.S. history class. Always curious about the world and mature beyond her years, Hilary stood out as a very special student. Our friendship continued to grow throughout the years in the Boston area while she attended Wellesley College and graduate school at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and it continued on after her move to Washington, D.C. Having degrees in political science and public policy, Hillary began her 30-year career of service to nonprofit organizations helping to promote equality and justice in order to meet people's basic human needs. Hillary has advised hundreds of community organizations across the U.S. to help them achieve their missions. She authored the U.S. State Department NGO, or non-government organizations, Management Handbook. And because of her expertise in this field, she works with the U.S. Embassy Speakers Program to provide capacity building training to local NGOs at the request of the U.S. embassies. She has trained NGO leaders in Botswana, Brunei, Latvia, the Maldives, Nepal, Singapore, and Sri Lanka. In addition to her overseas work, Hillary has worked extensively with refugees, consulting with the Refugee Congress, the only national advocacy organization in the U.S., led by refugees and asylees. She presently works with the United Stateless, the only national organization in the U.S., led by stateless people, to assist in developing mission, vision, and structure for their organizations. Throughout her career, Hillary has served on many different boards, ranging from those dealing with domestic violence to early childhood education for low-income students. Her past consulting has included work with various associations, such as the Cambodian Association of Greater Philadelphia, Capital Area Muslim Bar Association, National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, South Asian American Leading Together, and Ms. Foundation for Women. Hillary is especially passionate about creating spaces for young people to tell their truth and to develop the tools to be change agents. She was co-founder with her husband Kike and managing director of Soleil Soul in DC, and a founding board member of Voices Unbroken in the South Bronx, both grassroots arts and activist organizations that nurtured the voices of young people and socially conscious artists. In addition, as the director of the Alliance for Justice, she managed national training and technical assistance to help young people develop advocacy and to support youth-led action for change. Creating engaged community dialogue about social issues has always been a priority for Hillary, as is reflected by the countless hours spent in fostering safe environments for those dialogues to take place. Hillary's achievements are too numerous to enumerate today. Over the years, she has mentored scores of youth, refugees, and immigrant leaders, helping them to advocate for their communities. Hillary continues her work as an independent consultant, devoting her life to fighting for those who are marginalized by helping them to use their voices to fight for justice and equality. She has used her privilege and her education in the service of others, showing compassion and love for humanity every step of the way. I am very proud today to present this award to my good friend, Hillary Binder-Aviles, in recognition of her distinguished service to humanity.
There isn't anyone on the planet I would rather get an award from than Miss Viz. Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Yeah? All right. So it's always so funny to hear people, right, read about you. And it's an honor, and it's a trip to come back to your high school. And I just want to give you say a little bit more about what I do now. It's kind of sometimes hard to describe. I always say that my work is very much behind the scenes. How many of you, I think a lot of you are probably part of some clubs, student groups, maybe, how many of you, yeah, raise your hand, you're doing something. Right, so why? You join a club because there's something you want to do. Maybe you want to help people. Maybe you want to just have fun, right? But you come together because there's something you want to accomplish, right? And when people come together, what do you need to do? You need to agree. What are we going to accomplish? What are our goals? What's our vision? What are we trying to change, right? Who's going to do what? You have to have a plan. So when people around the world, across the country, in communities, in Washington, D.C., in Boston, in Massachusetts, come together because they want to change something. They want to help people. They want to right a wrong. They see a problem they want to solve. They've got to figure out how they're going to do that. And often they'll create an organization, a nonprofit organization. How many of you have heard of that term? Nonprofit organization? Yeah, maybe you volunteered for one. Maybe you'll found one. Maybe you'll be on the board of one. And these are organizations through which people can express that aspiration and work toward that vision and that change that they want to see in the world. So my role is to help them with that, is to help them put those pieces together to create an organization that they can accomplish their vision for making the world a better place. And so, you know, listening to Mr. Datami talk about the many ways in which he has been of service to others, and how you can, as one individual person, make a change and make a difference. Through the work I do, I get to see the power of people coming together and organizing themselves to help each other, but also to speak up, to speak out when they see something that's wrong, to try to change things, to try to change laws, to try to change policies, so that you're helping one person, but then you're also, maybe you're helping one person have a meal and a roof over their head for one day, but you're also changing a law or a policy or funding priorities to make sure that hundreds or thousands of people can have a decent, safe place to live, or clean water to drink, or healthy food to eat. So I feel so blessed every day, because I always say I get to work with the best of humanity, because I'm working with people who are trying to change things. And I know some others here on stage have, through the work they've done, maybe have had to see some of the worst of humanity, and that's important too, because we've got to be aware of that, and we have to try to change it. So I love my work. I work hard. I spend a lot of evenings and weekends in meetings and on conference calls, and sometimes my husband's opening the door to my office and, you know, can't we have dinner? Can't you have some family time? I'm sure everyone on stage has had that feeling of, you know, your family wants some of your time too while you're out trying to make things better for the world. And you can do that. You can have a balance in your life, doing good and taking care and changing the world, and taking care of yourself and your friends and your family, and building your own community. So that's a little bit about what I do now, but what I really want to say is how I got here, and how, because I was you, I sat in that chair, and 35 years ago, and say a little bit about my journey. And whenever people ask me in the work that I do, you know, how'd you get here? How is it that you ended up doing this kind of work? I always say it started in my high school. And it was because of this is where I get emotional. It was because of a teacher that I had who made a difference in my life. There are many wonderful teachers at DS, but Miss Viz, and it's so funny, because as she was describing our relationship, I had many of the same words down in my notes to describe our relationship. And Miss Viz, what can I say, opened my eyes to a bigger world, and kind of sparked in me a curiosity of wanting to learn about people who were different from me, about other cultures, about their histories, and to really have a respect for that. I remember after class, sometimes I'd just hang out after school, and I'd go sit in her room and maybe distract her from grading or doing whatever other task she had to do, because her room was full of maps and photos, and I would just want to hear about her travels, but not just the travels, but her beliefs, and why, you know, of just belief in people and their right to live with human dignity. And I may not have understood it in that way at that time, but I've really understood it now, that's the lesson that I learned. And so for me, it's always been my, you know, thing that I live by, that has been a big part of my journey, is to step out of your comfort zone. You have to be able, I think, the way, if you want to make a difference and you want to learn, take some risks. Step out of something that feels very comfortable for you, and learn about somebody else's life. learn about what it is to maybe see things from their perspective or walk in their shoes. So when I left Dover-Sherborn, I went to Wellesley, and through a professor there, I started volunteering at a refugee resettlement agency. This was in the mid-'80s, and the United States was resettling people who had fled the Vietnam War, and they were coming from Cambodia and Vietnam, fleeing violence, right? Looking for a better life, to be safe, and the U.S. was welcoming people in. I volunteered, and I was matched with a family as to be their kind of just their tutor, mentor, helper. They lived in public housing in Somerville, Mass. That's a world away from my house in Dover, right? And so I would go once a week, and I would just visit them. We would sit. Maybe we'd watch a movie. They'd ask me questions about life in America. We'd take the bus somewhere. We'd sit and go through their mail, and I'd, oh, you don't need to pay attention to that. Now, this is a letter from the school. This is what this means. And we would just talk and get to know each other. And from there, it's my kind of journey has been one of continuously trying to learn and understand the world and step out of my comfort zone. And every time I do that, I'm also questioning, not just getting to know people, but saying, why? Why do you live in housing that is really that is dangerous, that is not kept up? And I live in very safe, comfortable housing. This is wrong, right? Everybody has the right to safe, basic, decent housing, right? So what can I do about that? How can I use what I know and know how to do to help make sure that everyone has what they need to thrive, right? To be that person who can contribute back to society and to live with human dignity. So that is the journey that I've taken. It's been very interesting. I've gotten to work with, as Becky said, I've been in, I think, probably 40 states around the country, working with small community-based nonprofit organizations started by refugees and immigrants and people who have come here in search of a better life and safety for their families, to organize organizations so that they can speak out and advocate for their needs and build their own communities. I've been able to travel around the world and do the same kind of work of working with people who come together to solve a problem, to address a human need, to make life better for people. And it's been incredibly rewarding. And so I don't know how I'm doing for time, but I think the last kind of things I would like to say to all of you is, as Mr. Datami said, each one of you has the capacity to make the world a better place, right? And you've got to figure out what that means for you. How you can start often by helping, lending a hand to somebody, being a mentor, a tutor, a friend, a volunteer. But as you go out there and you do these things, also question, right? And look at why are things the way they are? And what can I do about that, right? And find, what you really feel passionate about. And you can make a difference there and have very interesting and rewarding life. I often say where I am now is not necessarily where I thought I would be when I was sitting in your shoes, but I don't regret any of it. It's been incredibly rewarding and interesting, and I'm looking forward to what I can do in the next 20 years, I hope, to continue to make a difference. So I look forward to getting to talk to some of you later today, and thank you very much. It's go out there and step out of your comfort zone and make a difference. Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I need a little stretch. I didn't do my exercise. If you want to take 20 seconds and stand up and stretch a little, why don't you do that? And hey. Okay, I didn't mean taking a couple of minutes of exercise or anything. I'm glad we all got a little stretch. We can only concentrate so long on hearing people talk. So I'm glad you took advantage of that break. Judge Diane Kottmeyer. I taught with Judge Diane Kottmeyer when she taught Latin and coached field hockey at Dover-Sherborn, way back in '67 to '71. In 1971, Diane decided to leave teaching and go to Boston College Law School. Eventually, Diane became an outstanding special attorney for the United States Department of Justice, and finally, an outstanding trial judge for the Superior Court of Massachusetts. I remember hearing about her work as a chief prosecutor in a case involving Gennaro Angiulo, who was the head of the La Cosa Nostra in Boston, and 4 of his associates. Among the several charges were 6 murders, threatening witnesses, and loan sharking. Diane was not able to get one witness against them, but through the FBI taping of Angiulo and his associates, Diane convinced the jury of all their guilt. The FBI had installed a listening device in the ceiling of the mafia's headquarters in the north of Boston. And Gennaro was heard on tape saying, "Kill her, kill him." And also Gennaro was heard saying to his associates, "We can't begin to dig up half the people we got rid of, and I'm not bragging either." After the trial, I had Diane come to one of my classes at Dover-Sherborn and talk to my students. I asked her if she didn't fear being killed by the mafia for prosecuting this case. And what do you think she said? No. They go after witnesses, not prosecutors. Therefore, there were no witnesses at the trial. It's my great honor to present Judge Diane Kottmeyer. Let me get this one here.
Good morning. Well, until today, my claim to fame at Dover-Sherborn has been that I was perhaps the only coach in the Tri-Valley League, probably in the state and the nation, who became the coach of a team and had never, not only never played the sport, but had never seen a game. And that was the field hockey team, which found itself without a coach at the beginning of the season in my second year of teaching here at Dover-Sherborn. The students asked me if I would be their coach, and when I explained that never having seen a game and knowing next to nothing about sports, much less about field hockey, I didn't think that I was a good choice for that role. They said, "Don't worry, we know how to play the game, but we need to have an adult or we can't practice or go to play games." So I became a coach, as I say, never having seen a game. And the girls were true to their word, and they won the Tri-Valley League Championship 3 years in a row. So I continue to be the talk of the league among coaches throughout my tenure. I have, as one of my proudest possessions, a silver bowl inscribed, "Thanks, Coach, TVL League Champions, Girls Field Hockey, 1970. This plaque will join that bowl as one of my proudest possessions. I came to Dover-Sherborn at the age of 21, having graduated from college just a couple of months before. And as many of you students will learn, the moving from being a student to your first job in a profession is very challenging. Dover-Sherborn has always loomed large in my life because of the sense of community that I found here. I had a lot to learn as a first-year teacher, as most new teachers do. And I found here a faculty which included Mr. Davis, Mr. Datami, who was then known to the students as Mr. Didamy, Richard Wakely, who was a guidance counselor then and became a principal here at Dover-Sherborn for a long time, and many others, Florence Cranshaw, who was also a guidance teacher, who provided help and all of the support that I needed to make me a better teacher. And in addition, I had the pleasure of teaching students who were eager to learn, some more than others when it came to Latin, but who made every day really a pleasure in terms of their just exuberance and the zeal with which they approached important things in their lives. After teaching for almost 4 years, there were many changes going on, which included the fact that law schools were opening up to women. Like others here, I was largely influenced in my switch from being a teacher to being a lawyer by a teacher I had in high school. That teacher had started a girls' debating society, and my friends and I loved that teacher, and we didn't want to disappoint her. And also, the debating society met on Wednesday nights, and it was an opportunity to get out of the house. So we joined the debating society, and I found that I really enjoyed debating, and that is analyzing two sides of an issue. I'm really going to date myself. In 1967, when I came here, none of the students here were born, and most of your teachers probably weren't born. And when I was in high school, the major issue that was subject to debate was whether China should be invited to join the UN. Then it was known, the Iron Curtain was in effect, and China was known as Red China. Should Red China be permitted to join the United Nations? I became skilled in arguing both sides of that issue, and people would often say, you should be a lawyer, because lawyers argue, and they argue both sides of every question. At that time, girls didn't go to law school, and for financial and other reasons, mostly because it simply seemed like a pipe dream for a girl to think that she could go to law school. I didn't pursue it and became a teacher, and a Latin teacher, and loved Latin and loved my students. But when law schools began to open up to women, I thought, well, this is an opportunity. It's something I've always wished I could do, so I am going to do it. And I went on, and as Bill described, was fortunate to have a career in which I was able to spend a large part of my work time in public service, working in government positions, both as a prosecutor and as a judge. There's a Latin expression, pro bono publico, I can't leave here without going back to Latin. And it means for the public good, for the good of the community. And in the legal profession, it's come to mean work that is done for free, that is of service to a person or organization in need, such as work that many of the others on the podium do. I've always hated the English use of that Latin phrase, because it's, as I say, it's begun to be associated with work that is performed for free as a donation, as it were. And it suggests that the person who performs the work is doing the giving, and that the organization or person in need is the recipient, when in fact it's very much a two-way street. And as I think anyone here on the stage can tell you, that doing something that is of service to your community, whether it be international, like Hillary and Charlie, national, local, like Mr. Datami and myself, the rewards that you receive from doing the work far outweigh any sacrifice that you make in volunteering or in changing professions. And so it's important to recognize, and I hope that all of you realize, that by contributing time and effort to a person or organization that furthers the goals of a civil society and of living in a community where people respect each other and work toward achieving some measure of happiness or security for others is extremely rewarding. And when you look back, as you will, when you I know it's hard to believe, but someday you'll reach the age in which you are looking back over a long career. The things that will stand out for you and the things that you will be most proud of are the things that you have done to further the happiness and security and address other challenges that face society today. For my part, people often talk about my years as a prosecutor of organized crime at a time when I indeed came in contact with and prosecuted people who devoted their lives to accomplishing evil and worked very hard at it. But what I remember most and take most pride in are the opportunities that I had to help people and provide work that caused a systemic change in some way. That would include work that I did. Many of you probably watch Law and Order. Are there many of you who see Law and Order these days? So Law and Order has a spin-off special crimes unit. And I was lucky enough when I was a fairly young attorney to have the opportunity to work in the district attorney's office in Essex County. And there, it was just at the time when victims' rights were being recognized. And here in Norfolk County and in Essex County, there were young DAs, district attorneys, who wanted to create a change in the prosecution of cases that involve sexual abuse. It had been a very unforgiving atmosphere for victims, so that there were many changes in the law that needed to be made and changes in the approach that people made to prosecuting these cases that would address the needs of victims and try to eradicate or at least work to achieve justice in cases in which such crimes had been committed. And so we created a unit in the Essex County District Attorney's Office, and I was fortunate enough to be hired to be in charge of it, that essentially developed procedures for educating police officers and establishing special crimes units that would handle these cases with the appropriate sensitivity. And we also worked to improve the laws that applied to the trial of the cases so that the victims weren't put on trial, to create laws that enabled victims to speak out, participate in the process, hire victim witness advocates whose job it was to hold the hand, so to speak, of victims throughout the trial process, which is, as you can imagine, a very difficult process. So when I look back over my career, it's not the organized crime cases that I am feel most gratified by having been able to participate. It is a situation like that in Essex County when I was able to work with other people to effectuate changes to a system that benefited the community as a whole. So again, I'm looking forward to speaking with the students individually and answering any questions that they may have. I do want to say that this is indeed an honor that I will treasure. And I want to thank first I want to thank the Dover-Sherborn Committee and community that created this honor. I want to thank those who selected me to receive it and congratulate my fellow recipients. Thank you.
It gives me the greatest pleasure to introduce my former student, Charles Sennett, or Charlie, as I will refer to him. That's okay. No. Renowned international journalist and 1980 graduate of Dover-Sherborn. I have followed his career for over 30 years, admiring his incredible contributions to the field of journalism and respecting the mission to ensure the integrity of his profession through the training of young people to speak truth to power. I haven't been surprised by Charles' success, although thinking back to his student days here at DS, I wasn't always sure that he read his current events assignments in my contemporary issues course. But seeing as he has spent his life writing about those very issues for the rest of us to read, I guess he can forgive that on my part a little bit. I believe Charles' intellect, his energy and fearlessness to speak out, and his gumption, traits which were evident even in his high school days, have served him well in weathering the challenges and dangers of his chosen profession. Charlie Sennett is the founder, chief executive officer, and editor of the Ground Truth Project. He is an award-winning correspondent, best-selling author, and editor with 30 years of experience in international, national, and local journalism. A leading social entrepreneur in new media, Charlie started Ground Truth in 2014, and in 2017 launched the nonprofit organization New Local Reporting Initiative, Report for America. Reporting on the front line of wars and insurgencies in at least 20 countries, including the post-9/11 conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq and the 2011 Arab Spring, Charlie began his career in local news covering cops, courts, and municipal government. His deep experience reporting led him to dedicate himself to supporting and training the next generation of journalists to tell the most important stories of our time. Charlie is also the co-founder of Global Post, an acclaimed international news website. Previously, he worked for many years as a reporter at the New York Daily News and then the Boston Globe, where he served as the Globe's Middle East bureau chief, based in Jerusalem, and as Europe bureau chief based in London, and a leader of the paper's international coverage from 1997 to 2005. Charlie has also served as a correspondent for PBS Frontline and the PBS NewsHour. He has contributed news analysis to the BBC, CNN, NPR, MSNBC, and others. He is the author of 2 books, The Body and the Blood and The Broken Covenant, and a co-author of 2 others. Charlie is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism, and was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University. He now lives with his lovely wife and 4 sons in Harvard, Massachusetts. Charlie, your humanitarian work and your willingness to speak truth to power distinguishes you from so many others and makes you deserving of this Hall of Distinguished Service Award. Congratulations.
good to be back. Thank you, Ms. Viz. Good morning, Raiders. That doesn't sound like the Raiders. Good morning, Raiders. Yeah. I loved this place. I really love being back. But the truth is, this could have gone either way. Ms. Visilis hinted at the fact that for me to be in the Hall of Distinguished Service is truly an honor, but there's a thin line of life that's like a fissure that cracks along the Hall of Detention and the Hall of Distinguished Service. And I managed to skate that line. I was not easy. I asked a lot of hard questions in this school. And I hope you're asking hard questions too, and I hope you keep asking them. Sometimes your teachers will roll their eyes, sometimes you'll get sent to the office, and believe me, that happened a lot to me. I was joking with Superintendent Andrew Keogh that I can still hear Mr. Marlborough's voice over the intercom saying, "Charles Sennett, please report to the office. Charles Sennett." That really happened in these halls. So honored to be here, deeply honored by this. And I wanted to talk to you today as digital natives about 4G. 4 Gs to be precise. Gratitude, growing passion, ground truth, and giving back. So I'm going to go through the 4G network. I'm going to start with gratitude. I just have to take a moment to thank Mr. Davis and just say, Mr. Davis, what an extraordinary run. Thank you for putting this together. I'm deeply honored. Coach, thank you. I just want to say thank you very much. Thanks to all of the committee and to John Kirby. They all put so much effort into this. Thank you. Thanks to Superintendent Keogh, my classmate, my friend. It's so good to see you. I want to say thanks to Ms. Viz. You know, you mentioned that I wasn't always prepared for social studies class. And I remember specifically a day when Steve Cobb, who's sitting here up front, we were not prepared for an assignment on immigrants. And we had to come in and do like a presentation. And Gob and I made up a language that day of Eastern immigrant origin, and we just faked the whole thing, and we still do the language together. You made learning so much fun. We still joke about that moment in class, and I think it's why I remember your class so much, is that we were allowed to have fun while we were learning. Gob, we're going to have to practice this in the hallways just for old time's sake. I'll spare you from it, and Steve is much better at it than I am, so ask him to do it. And I just want to say thank you so much to my co-honorees. I mean, this is an extraordinary group, truly. Judge Kottmeyer, as a prosecutor, standing up to the mafia. Hillary, really out in the world, providing service in so many corners of the world that really need it. And of course, to Mr. Datami, who has given so much of himself, literally, to this school and to our community. You know, I remember so well running around the track at track practice and Mr. Datami always being out there, but I never saw those early morning runs, Mr. Datami. As you might remember, my family and I struggled to get here on time quite a bit. So I don't remember the early mornings, but I definitely remember track practice after school. And thank you for your service. I want to also say, as part of the gratitude in the 4Gs, that I just want to thank my family as well. My mom is here, Virginia Sennett, who did put us all through those days of getting up early, making sure we had breakfast, trying her best to get us out the door even when we were running late constantly. And I had a great honor this year to step back and write a book with my mom. We really stopped, and she wanted to tell her story, and she's done a beautiful job. And I just want to say thanks, Mom, for everything. Truly, you are the mother of 5. All 5 of us graduated from here. 2 of my brothers and my sister are here. And I got to give a big shout out to my brother Rob, who's the one who actually brought Aerosmith to Dover-Sherborn. To my brother Mark, who I've always looked up to, and who, they were older than me. You might notice that as you meet them. But seriously, I just want to say thank you to all of my family. My sister Ellen, who is just a real great mom, a great force in our family, and someone who pulls us together. But also to my wife Julie, who's here, and the mother of our 4 sons, and who I really owe a huge debt of gratitude to. So I'm going to ask you to do something, and Hillary and I were talking about how important this is to do. It's a little bit of an exercise, but I just want you to look to the left and to the right for 1 minute and think about gratitude and think about not leaving this school. How many of you are seniors? Raise your hand if you're a senior. Okay. Especially you seniors. Look around this room and think about someone who you want to express gratitude to. I'm going to tell you a story of a shot I missed at gratitude that I'll never forget. One of the great teachers here at Dover-Sherborn was Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell taught great books in Shakespeare. Mr. Russell was the first person who ever said to me, "You can write. This is really good. You should do this." Mr. Russell was an extraordinary teacher, and I used to go through life thinking, I'm going to go back and thank him someday. I really want to find Mr. Russell. I got to go back and tell him that he influenced my life. And I kept saying that I would do this. And I went off to cover wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I traveled all over the world. We had 4 kids, life got busy, and I just kept not getting time to write a letter or to find out where he was and to make sure I went and thanked him. Eventually, I thought, I'm back from living abroad. We moved out to Harvard, Massachusetts, and I thought, I got to find Mr. Russell. I need to thank him. I just kept saying this. And then, so sadly, I picked up our local newspaper in Harvard, Massachusetts, and there was an obituary for Mr. Russell. And he was living, for some of the time we were there, just a few miles away. I never got to say thank you. So I'm going to say thank you to Mr. Russell in honor of Mr. Russell. One of the greats here. Yeah, we can do that. The second G is grow passion. I used to say find passion, and I no longer say that because it makes it sound like passion is something that just descends from the heavens and you have found your passion, like in the stained glass windows in a church. It's not like that. You have to grow your passion. Find something you love to do, and then work hard at getting good at it, and that becomes your passion. So how many of you had senior project? Do you still do that? Oh, you're out. They're out. They're out in the world. That's okay. Well, to those doing senior project, God bless you, because that's where I first found my passion. I really, truly discovered that in my senior year, when I worked at a radio station called WCAS in the newsroom there, I realized I really want to do this. And ever since then, I have been doing it. And I just would say, grow your passion. Don't let anyone tell you you need to find your passion. Find something you love to do, get good at it, go out and do it. That becomes your passion. The third G is ground truth. How many of you have heard of the word ground truth? In the front row here does not count. Just raise your hand if you have heard of this term. Okay. Did anybody out there? No? All right. So I want to talk about what ground truth is. Ground truth is a technical term. I first heard it in the military when I was covering a unit in Baghdad. And they would come back from an area of operation and say what the ground truth was from that area of operation. It's obvious. It's the truth from the ground as someone is bringing it back. But then I learned it has a very specific and very technical meaning. And ground truth applies to the calibration process with satellites. So when a satellite is in the sky and it's reading something on the Earth, it needs to be very precise, right? So how many of you have used Google Earth? Okay. So when you use Google Earth and you come in on your town or this school or wherever you want to go, you ever wondered how the pixels align like that? The way they align is that you need a human reading on the ground that can be calibrated against the satellite. And when there's a conflict, it can be recalibrated to adjust the satellite so it reads things accurately, whether that's barometric pressure or temperature or a visual image through pixels. That process, called ground truthing, is, I think, a great metaphor for the time we live in. I never thought of NASA as poetic, but in its definition, its clinical, very precise definition, it says, in the process of ground truthing or recalibrating a satellite, when there is a conflict between the technology in the sky and the human reading on the ground, trust the human reading. That's what journalism is. Journalism is the human reading on the ground. And we live in a time of technology where there's so much information bombarded at you, and it can get very confusing, and it feels like the pixels don't align, and you're being bombarded with all kinds of points of view. I want to really encourage you to think about that calibration process. Think about what we know on the ground. What are the discernible facts that we can gather that can really help you calibrate truth? Because we live in a time when it feels like journalism is under attack. Journalism has not done its job very well in recent years. But truth is under attack too. Right now we live in a time when there are a lot of people who are doing what I would call weaponizing doubt, creating doubt as if truth can't be discerned. It can be discerned. There are always many truths, but you have to really work hard to get at the facts that bring us to truth. And I want to just ask you all to be ground truthers. Okay, so there's going to be one last activity beyond looking to your left and your right and stretching as Mr. Davis had us do. And that is, there's going to be a point where I say, whose truth? And I would love it if you guys would respond, ground truth. I'm not going to do it right now, but it will come a time when I will do this. The last G. Is really about giving back. And that's been talked about a lot here. But I did want to share with you what is journalism, what is my job, and what is the ground truth that I've been able to do out there. Very briefly, ground truth is about doing the kind of journalism where you're there on the ground, and that's really defined my life. And I didn't become a foreign correspondent covering wars overnight. I didn't just throw up my hand and say, I want to go to the Middle East and I want to be the Baghdad bureau chief or the Kabul bureau chief. For me, what it was a career where I worked hard at local reporting, and I became a police reporter in New York City. And in 1993, there was a loud bang in Lower Manhattan. So it was 1993. And I responded as a police reporter. And I was there on the ground as a police reporter, and there was smoke pouring out of the World Trade Center parking garage. And it was, as we would learn, a bombing. And it was the first bombing of the World Trade Center. It was 1993, 8 years before 9/11. And as a police reporter, my job was to figure out who tried to blow up the World Trade Center. They failed. 6 people were killed, but they did not take the tower down. My editors said to me, we want you to go find out who these guys are. And it took me to being a police reporter. First, it took me to New Jersey and Brooklyn. And then it took me to Egypt and Khartoum and the Sudan. I found out there was a guy there who was a very tall sheikh who was the leader of this group that was trying to coordinate an attack against America. And as we would learn, this tall guy with a long beard and white robes was named Osama bin Laden. But it was 1993, and I was a police reporter, and we were just trying to put this together. And I say this because this is really what it means to grow your passion, to find the thing you want to do, to try to be good at it, to really work at it. For me, that led to a life. That assignment became covering the Middle East. And I went on for the Boston Globe to take that on as a job and to be Middle East bureau chief, and then for Frontline and for others. But it really began local for me, so please think about that. And think about how journalism's under attack. Think about how much you hear that is negative about the media. And remember, the media is a lot of different things. It's not one thing, it's many things. And there are people out there who really risk their lives to try to get at those truths and bring them home to you. So evaluate how they're doing. Stay alert. Be ground truthers. And when you're being ground truthers, think about that word, ground truth. Whose truth? All right, the last one is give back, and thank you. The last one is about giving back, and it's basically to say, I loved what Mr. Davis said about when you get, give. When you learn, teach. What a beautiful way to frame this day. I have been so lucky to be given so much and to have learned so much in this building from teachers, from friends, from family. Remember that. Really remember that out in the world. Giving back doesn't mean you have to join an organization to give back. Giving back can be just looking to your left and looking to your right, and making sure you're looking out for people. It could be in your town, it could be in your classroom, it could be in your own family. You can always find a way to give back. And that really is, I think, the message of today. And I'm just deeply honored by this award. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we could once again give a round of applause for all of our deserved recipients.